By way of introduction, I'm Steve Nicholls, Managing Director of Executive Connexions. We're a career coaching and outplacement company, UK based, but we've got representation sort of all over the world, generally speaking, in some of the main centres anyway. These sessions have been created as a sort of a value add to the paid coaching services that we offer through outplacement or individual coaching that people invest in, because it's important to have a way for you to be able to ask questions as well. So it's more around an informal, think of it as group coaching as much as anything else, I would say. Just moving a couple of bits to one side here. And I've just realized that my video is off, I've been told. Thank you very much, Dorcas, asking everybody to put their video on. And my video is off. Excellent. So there we go. The series will be covering things like last week we did CV, this week interviews. There may be the hidden jobs market. There will be personal branding. So you'll be informed as we move forward into the sessions what those sessions actually are. So yeah, okay. I think we're ready to kick off on that now. So that's what we don't want the vibe to be like in an interview, obviously. And I say this without any joking, really. I know the image is a bit of a joke per se, but think about it as a meeting of equals. People can go along and think that they're a bit phased by whatever the interview scenario might be. So just think of it as a meeting of equals. And with that mindset, you should be a lot better prepared. What kind of styles of interview are there? I would say that because we speak to a lot of senior level executives across a range of sectors and disciplines and so on, that it is often a meld of all these different styles. So I'm not trying to say here on this presentation that you've got lots of different styles separately. They may all blend into each other. I would say I would pick out on this slide, I would pick out the second point, and we've had feedback from people prior to them starting to work with us, of course, that they were a bit phased by general questions like this about how would you describe your leadership style, just as a sort of an interview question. So it's very important to remember that you're not always going to be asked technical things about the achievements you've had and all of this. There may be things that reflect on what some people still call soft skills. I think they're really paramount and fundamental in a leadership role. So also with this, make sure you've got specific examples, making sure you hit all the points that you need to in that interview. And I'll probably say this a few times throughout this, just make sure you practice them. Don't make the first time you hear those words coming out of your mouth be on the day of the interview. Just whether you record it, play it back to yourself. We do that in a coaching kind of context as well, obviously, but with yourself, you can record it on your phone, you can play it back, you can get it written down in longhand, you can convert it to spoken language, and then just keep rehearsing. I might be asked something about that, I might be asked something about this, I might be asked something about that. Each one, practice and rehearse. Again, it links in together. I often talk about the STAR technique to do with CVs, don't we? So it can equally apply, I feel, within an interview context. It will ground you as well. Even if in the interview itself, a lot of this goes out the window, just think about the result. If you're talking and you're answering and you're thinking, where am I going this? How do I close this off? Just think about what the result would be at the very end. That's the most important part. Again, that's something you can practice and rehearse and play back to yourself. And obviously it's something that we work hard with people on, because you have to keep doing it. Practice is practice. It's not just a one hit thing. But certainly think about that structure as far as interview answers as well as anything else. You probably sat in front of panels already. You might have been part of a panel even. So one thing to bear in mind with that is could be about communication styles as well, because if you've got a CEO, a HR person, and a marketing person, let's say, they may all have different communication styles. One might need to be quite short and top line information. One you might need to enthuse a bit more, and one you might need to give a bit more detail to. Something we can talk about in more detail anyway. Difficult to do on the fly, but it's just an appreciation that there could be different communication styles. So And that's the takeaway there, really. The questions in terms of diversity could be around managing remote teams as well. So it can be broad, not just about the makeup of that team. Speaking to someone the other day, and they were pulled in for an interview. Great, loving it. They come into a room. Next thing in it, they know the staff are all gathered there, and bit of an ambush, you could say, couldn't you? It wasn't part of the process, but they were asked to give a few words to the assembled crowd, and again, think about that. Be ready for anything. It's often the case either whether it's informal or not. So just because it's not part of the schedule, be prepared for something like that. So, and again, I'm saying it again, practice. It's one of those things that's really important. You want to practice to a point so you've got the facts off and you're rehearsing things aloud. Aloud is very important. So you just hear the sound of your own voice coming across and how it sounds. But keep it succinct as well. You don't want to be talking for too long in that scenario. So yeah, be prepared for ad hoc requests to give talks. Again, it blends into the whole interview thing, but it can be quite important to certain organizations where they really want you to buy into their culture and values. This isn't just about reading it on the website and repeating it, during an interview. It's about giving real examples of how you align with those values as well. And again, examples, practice, rehearse. It's a two-way street. You remember that image I showed you earlier on? It's about being on that same wavelength. They're asking you about your values and so on. You've got every right to be quizzing them about theirs and making sure that they're walking the talk. And if you have a dialogue-based interview, it's much easier to do that, of course. Talk a lot about authenticity these days. It's a buzzword, obviously, but being yourself is really important. I do believe you can over prepare for an interview. What's the cutoff point? I don't know if there's a hard and fast answer to that question, to be honest with you. I think you have to come to a point where you believe you've done a significant amount and then get to the point where you can relax, let it all absorb, and really, really remember to be yourself on the day. I was speaking to someone very recently, ex-client of ours who's now in a really great role. They're loving it. New into the role, but they're loving it. And they missed out on maybe one before that, which ironically, the one they're in now they like more, but the one they missed out on, they felt maybe they'd over prepared a bit and they just weren't. They were maybe a bit stiff. They weren't allowing themselves to be themselves. So just bear that piece in mind as well. Very, very important to come across as the true and best you. Probably even say that a little bit later on here, actually. So you've probably all done, again, personality tests and so on. Are we familiar with those? There's no way to trick them, and why would you want to trick them anyway? It's just answering according to your true personality. As much as you may want a role, you've got to know that the honeymoon of getting the role is going to be the same once you get into the role. They've got to know that as well. So yeah, the anxiety or the frustration of not being in a role, if that's your situation, can soon turn into, I've made a mistake here, if a few months down the road, if you're not careful. So just make sure you know yourself, and be yourself, importantly, just like I mentioned before. I don't know if you've been on any of these informal type of affairs where you might go along expecting an interview. It could be with a company leader, could be a chairman, a non-executive director, and all of a sudden they'll say, well, let's go up here instead. Let's go up to the wine bar or wherever. So again, it's a slightly different context. It's more conversational perhaps, but you need to ensure that kind of conversation you're having still includes all the relevant aspects that you want to get across to that person. The bit about keeping abreast of current affairs, I mean, that's about, we've worked with people who've not been working for 12 months or 2 months or 3 months, or longer. So it's just about how you keep your continuous professional development up, really, and how you can demonstrate that. So yeah, I think again, authenticity is spoken about quite a bit. It is just about being consistent, I think. Some people that we've worked with, and they all went through this process, just so you know. There are more testimonials on our website in any event, but and many of these people we've met, we had the conversations, there was frustration, there was, you know, no view of the end result, if you like. So, you know, you sort of work through things. You work through the emotional part, you work through the creating and refining your assets, your CV, your LinkedIn profile, how you're going to come across an interview, like we're talking about now, which is the acid test, of course. You know, it's okay having a really great CV. You know, you've researched, you've spent forever online, and you think you've got the perfect CV. When you get in front of someone, it's still got to be that same person that's on paper, you know, that comes across at that interview. So yeah, the bit about going the extra mile, you know, are there company reports, financial reports, maybe if you can access them online, get that little bit more information on the day of the interview. Google News, maybe, you know, the sort of subcategory Google News, where if there are any recent mergers and acquisitions or something else you should know about, and it's very recent and it's slipped your radar, then you can get that information from Google News and even do that building up to it. So you've got a little kind of armory of things you can sort of pull out and fire off if you need to. I've mentioned about practicing your questions, and that is important to do it aloud and not just, you know, to yourself, because if you just do it silently, you know, you won't hear how it's coming across. You won't hear whether you've got a tendency to ad lib and sort of go down a different avenue and then bring it back. Sort of practice and be quite rigid about it. And there, for about the fifth time, be yourself. It's really important. And I think that if you can take the best version of yourself to an interview, you know, you've got as good a chance as anybody. What we haven't talked about here is the physical side. You know, some people will talk about meditation, breathing techniques, doing some box breathing if you're into your breath work, things of that nature. What is going to bring you into a relaxed frame of mind before the interview, if you do really sort of suffer on the nerves front and you feel that's being detrimental to your performance? So worth looking at things like that as well. Yeah, it's the kind of stuff I know I certainly do it every day. Some people I know do it every day, and it just, you know, I think it helps with your overall professional practice in any event and your personal life as well, of course. We're not here for that though. So if you want to have a one-to-one with me, now these links will be in the chat as well. And Dorcas, who works with me, I don't know if you'd be able to put the links in the chat for me, please. That would be really, really helpful. The reason they're on this screen is, again, because people will see the recording, and it just gives people a chance to do a quick screenshot and then get the links and then book the opportunity. The reason there's two links there is that on these calls, we often have people not only live, but on the recordings, who are searching for a role themselves or searching for a move, or they've just been notified of redundancy or something. But we also have HR people that may be looking in to see how we can help with people they are unfortunately needing to talk to about exiting business as well. So yeah, in due course, those links will be in the chat as well. It's fairly busy at the moment, but I'm sure you'll find a slot if you wish to do so. Last point. Now, I've talked to you about interviews, although I just wanted to make the point there, that's not a kind of a prescriptive list. If you have any questions at all, then and maybe there's questions, the subjects that aren't on that list, you know, you're more than welcome to ask. Let's try and get a bit of a dialogue going. If you don't want to come and sort of unmute yourself and actually ask a question, then you can put it in the chat and I'll sort of try and address it there. But yeah, so the presentation, that concludes that piece of the morning, and back into the room for you guys. So let me do this, stop sharing here for a second. Okay. So we've got a few people on the call today. Who'd like to kick off with a question? I think everyone who's come along has got a particular thing in mind. There's something that they're trying to get, something they're trying to achieve from actually being on the call. Like I say, if you want to put a message into the chat, I don't need to quote your name when I'm giving the response. You know, I can more than happily do that. But I think I was just harking back to the point I made just now about the guy who got a role and reckoned he'd been more of himself on that particular occasion. And I think that's a really important takeaway for anybody to remember. It is very easy to sort of over prepare in these kind of situations. Just like last week, we had people asking questions about CVs and you know, how you work the actual executive summary and how long should that be and how should you write it and should it be in the first person and all those kind of technical things we are able to have a chat about. So, you know, if you've got any questions, but I don't want to finish the call prematurely. So I know there's often people don't want to be first in to ask a question. So that's fine. But I'll give it a couple of seconds and see if anyone wants to chime in. It's a very silent group this morning.
Hi, Steve. This is Heather.
Long time no speak, Haida. How are you?
Long time no speak. I'm just working from home, so I was in my casual, so that's why I didn't turn the camera on. If you want, I can, of course, do that.
No,
just
no
to say hi
problem.
to you. Yeah.
That's not
Yeah. Hope you are doing well, Steve. It's a long time that we have.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you've done, since we worked together, you've done really, really well. And I know you're really, really busy in your role, it sounds. How are things at the moment?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, some off and on, I look at the stuff which is happening in the market, and the presentation that you just made, it was kind of restatement of the things which I had also noted down in my notes as well. Of course, I do have one kind of my interview preparation file in which I have certain set of questions on which I have the answers. Over a period of years, giving interviews and taking interviews as well, one thing I myself has realized is whenever I memorize an answer, yeah, it gives, I'm trying to recall what I have memorized, yeah.
Okay.
But when I'm speaking from my heart, even though I know the point somewhere back of my mind, it comes out much more naturally and much in a better way rather than if I have a memorized response to, and somebody giving me a response as well. I can also pick up this person is giving me a memorized response or this person is speaking from the heart. So that was one comment I felt myself, and I want to hear your views that what you say about these things.
Yes. Okay. Got you. And yes, it's a very good point. And I think that how I would answer it is that the level of preparation is going to be down to the individual. And I talk a lot there about being natural and being yourself and all of that as well. And yet there is that almost maybe that tension about preparation and practice and so on as well. I think that if you view it as an acting piece, if you like, and again, that probably wouldn't fit in with the way that you want to actually do things. But the way that actors prepare would be to get everything on board and start repeating it. And in the end, it will come out as if it's natural and it's the first time they've said it. You know, I think there's a halfway house, you know, from what you're saying in terms of your own style, speaking from the heart is probably the best way of doing it. But that's also if you're able to be calm enough throughout if you're being interviewed, I mean, if you're able to be calm enough throughout that process to be able to recall things in almost a bullet point sort of style, you know, during the interview, then at least you're actually covering off the points that need to be covered off. You know, there's another aspect to it is around the type of interview, because public sector, private sector can be a little different as well. I don't want to totally neglect the public sector. If someone is working for, you know, a large local council, or here in the UK, like a National Health Service or something like this, then they have different ways of scoring people, regardless of seniority, through an interview. And you might need to touch off 3, 4, 5 different points. And they're sort of behind the desk with a, whatever it is, ticking off that you've hit those points. So it can be a little bit more, functional in that way. But I think, yeah, I certainly agree with you. I don't advocate that this is, and again, if it came across in that way, then it's good that you've brought it up, and that's where I need to adjust the way that the presentation comes across, perhaps. So practice to me doesn't mean coming across in a robotic way. It is just so you've actually got that information there logged away, and if you choose to bring it up at the time in that particular way, you will. But I think it will help you to pick out the main points that you're trying to get across as well. If you're a very cool character, then obviously you won't be as panicked about interviews as some people will be, but it will help some people to relax if they know they've at least got the tell me about yourself, tell me about a successful project you worked on and why was it successful. Tell me about one that didn't work, for example. Those kind of things, it's just about pulling out the examples. And I think many people would struggle to recall those things sort of on the fly, really. But not disputing what you say at all. And I think, there's comments here that, yes, I think it is a good point. You've got to be yourself, but you've got to actually make sure you've got the ammunition in your quiver that you can pull out and fire off at the same time. So it's it is very much a balance, I think. But I really appreciate your view. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the response. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
One question which I particularly ask in every interview which I have given, and we very rarely have got a good response. And sometimes I see the interviewer is being taken aback as well. When I talk to them about the culture, tell me the culture of your organization. And very few people have responded well to me. Either they have given me screensavers and saying nice things, and when you join them, you realize that what they had said, the reality is very, very different. Yeah.
Yes.
So especially the HR people, they know how to respond to these things, and certain people does not know how to respond to these questions. But the thing is, what really the culture is, you only come to know when you experience the organization. Then you really know what the culture is actually. Even though if I ask a question and they say nice things, of course, they will never tell the reality what the actual culture of the organization is.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this thing coming from a different companies in my experiences. People say things, and when you join them, you find realities are very, very different. So my dilemma is that while it's a very important question to know the culture, how to know actually what the culture is, until that somebody from the company and that individual will tell you the insight. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get the insight about the culture of that company.
I think it's an absolutely, it's a legitimate thing to ask. And I don't know whether I recall that when I was still doing some of the coaching in this company, whether or not we talked about that directly as a question, because it kind of rings a bell in a way. I think that to ask it is great. It puts you on that equal footing again, which I always talk about. It works even better if there were, say, 2 or 3 people, on a panel, and you want to get a view. You're interviewing them to a certain degree, as well. Again, it depends on your situation. Are you in a role? You're not sort of panicking about getting into a new role. What your mindset is, that's really, really important. But I think part of what you say, absolutely right. You won't know until you've crossed the finish line, and then are they walking the talk about culture, or do you speak to people who are already employees, confidentially, and try and get a feel for what that is? Do you try and get more information from annual reports, things of that nature about culture and values and all of that stuff? But I think that asking the question, it's going to tell you something, isn't it? It's going to tell you something. If you're being asked, have you got any questions? Yeah, I'd be really, I read all about your culture and values on the website. I'd just be really interested to hear what your take is on how you would describe the culture of the business. And if they're fazed by that question, then does it tell you something? But I think it's an intelligent question. to ask, anyway, in any event. But each to their own, horses for courses and all of that. It's a kind of a question which you can put on your list of questions I might ask or not, and maybe there's an argument for reframing it a bit as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to go back up to yeah, someone earlier on talked about the awkward silence. Yeah, there's always tumbleweed on these sessions. It's always tumbleweed, and then somebody will break the tumbleweed eventually. That's the way that it works. Talk about issues finding genuine agents, a lot of time wasters and CV harvesting. Yeah, I mean, it happens. It depends what your role is. If it's a senior level type of position, then I would always talk to people about applying for roles and interacting with agencies being one element of it, and the other element being the unadvertised jobs market, the hidden jobs market, the personal branding, the networking, all of that, which many people will neglect because it just seems a little bit more foggy to get your head around. How do you attract this hidden jobs market? A lot of it is around networking, getting out to more people, having more conversations, posting items on LinkedIn, getting involved in conversations that are, you can search on LinkedIn for hashtag subject areas relevant to your own industry interests and expertise. Chip in on those conversations. That's not maybe as humanly satisfying as clicking apply on something and then adding it to your spreadsheet or whatever it is that you do. So I get the question, I get where you're coming from, and I think that there will be the top tens out there, and I'm not paid or advertising any of the Heidrick and Struggles and Spencer Stewart, Russell Reynolds, and people who people might describe as the top 10, let's say. I wouldn't expect those type of agents to be among the ones you're saying are sort of time wasters, but it just depends on your role, depends what you're going for. Oh yes, I see the response about the mic not working, so I appreciate that. Let me have a look at what you said. So in the person that's put a note in the chat here, they're saying they recently had 2 interviews and been turned down for both roles. Sorry to hear that. One said that you were overqualified, and the other said they feel the firm may be too small for me. Depends if that feedback came from the hiring manager themselves or the recruiter. Are these just cop-outs is the question, really. It's very tempted for me to say, the overqualified piece feels like a cop-out, but it just depends on the circumstances, whether or not you're thinking of engaging in coaching sort of 100% seriously, 50% seriously, whatever it might be worth us having a conversation about that, just to actually dig a bit deeper into what the circumstances were. Were the roles exactly what you felt were spot on perfect for you? Were they the right kind of organizations? What was the scenario in the interview? What feeling did you get in the interview? What other feedback did you get in those particular cases? So the good thing is that you're getting interviews. There's just got to be a strategy to getting you across the finish line, and it's either the organizations are just not right, or there's something you're saying, doing, how you're coming across, that kind of unknown factor. But with being overqualified, it's very tempting to think of it as being a cop out. I don't use phrases like that too much. It's just reading down through a second. Yeah, someone's also said we're good to have links for previous presentations. Maybe just drop me a line on LinkedIn, the person that's dropped in that request about previous presentations. We tend to run on a function where we'll do one subject, and then we'll send the recordings out week by week by week. By registering once on LinkedIn, not on LinkedIn, sorry, on Zoom, you'll get to see the forthcoming ones. But past ones, yeah, I mean, just drop me a line. Usually there are social postings as well. we'll make the recordings freely available, on LinkedIn usually as well. So yeah, or either do that or drop me a line. Be happy to have a chat. And someone agreeing about Hyder's point, I think absolutely right. I think there's a really nice discussion to be had there about the right balance of preparation, making sure you've got the right things in your armory, and answers coming from the heart as well. So I'm going to steal that, Hyder. I think that's a really good point about things coming from the heart as well as the head, and I think it's it's certainly something to take on board. Preparation, I don't equate to being robotic about things, but I do agree that there's the right balance to be struck there. Okay, let's have a look. Right, okay. I think I've just about fielded the questions that are in the chat at the moment. So yeah, we've still got a few people on at the moment. Let's have a look. We've got Chad, we've got Manish, we've got Bob, we've got Frida, Tim here, George. Okay, all right. Well, look, if there are no more questions, I've still got, anything up to 10 minutes. I'm happy to stay on the call. But if there are no further questions, what will happen is you'll receive a link to the recording and you can home in on things that you feel were useful about it and maybe replay some of the discussions. And I think that, always more than happy to sort of help on an individual basis. You've got those links there anyway. If you don't want to step that far in terms of conversation, then ping me on LinkedIn. You'll find my email is accessible on LinkedIn as well. Okay, so if there are no further questions, just give it another couple of seconds. Feel free to get in touch and ask your questions if they come to you after the event as well. That's often something that happens. All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. Really appreciate you turning up today and taking the time to just listen and participate in the discussion. It's really important, and I'm really grateful for that. So have a good rest of your day, or in some people's cases, like Hyder, have a good evening. So all the very best. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Steve. Nice
Okay.
talking to you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.